Hey everybody, it's Mubali. And I figured we'd do something a little different from what I normally do. Something a little fun, something a little nerdy, something that might give some people who have very little experience with Max MSP and Max for Live a little walkthrough. And also a little peek into using sound for scientific purposes and some scientific applications of sound design techniques and just building interesting things. So we're going to do a little bit of computer science, a little bit of object-oriented programming, so to speak, and we also are going to be messing around with some psychology and some of the theories of psychoacoustics, at least one theory of psychoacoustics. What we're going to be dealing with is a work from an esteemed professor from UC San Diego by the name of Diana Deutsch. And we will call this episode Dr. Deutsch in the Case of the Mysterious Melody. This is a sonic illusion that Dr. Deutsch first published in 1972. And I also, this page from her site links to the sound demonstrations as well as the paper where she talks about this. And basically, what she was able to discover through her research is some interesting ideas on how we understand and recognize a tune. Now, what do I mean by a tune? What I mean by a tune is a very easily rememberable melody that is synonymous with a certain piece of music. And I won't go too in depth into what the paper says, but it's not that long of a paper. It's only 4 pages, so it's not very difficult read. So I encourage you to read it yourself and to check it out. However, to briefly give a synopsis on what she was talking about, the way that we can recognize a tune or recognize a melody is by not only its rhythmical arrangement, but also the actual melody itself, which is a sequence of tones that are usually within an octave, maybe 2, but usually like an octave scale or within an octave range, which is, upwards of 12, up to 12 notes. However, she was also able to determine, not she was also able to determine, but I think she was also able to determine this as well, but we also know that we can transpose a piece of music up or down an octave, and we'll pretty much understand it to be the same way. We could probably transpose it to a different key, and we might get a different feeling from it, but the tune will still be recognizable to most people. However, what she was able to figure out in 1972 is, suppose you have that same melody, and it's each note is randomly fluctuating between a range of 3 octaves, 1 octave above, 1 octave below, and the original pitch. She was able to discover through a series of tests that people had a hard time discovering what that melody actually was once you randomized these notes. And they're not randomized by their scale degree. It's not like it's a C that's randomized to an F, but it's actually, say it's C3 that's randomized to C4 or C2. And by doing this randomization, it was much more difficult for people to recognize the tune and know what it was. There's a couple of caveats with this, however. Once they were told what the piece was, they could always, no matter what the variation was in the octave, they could recognize the tune again. So it's very similar to this picture. We can't really disseminate what this picture is until we're told what to look for. The fact that we're told to look at a certain area, we can disseminate many different things from this particular picture. However, once I tell you that we're looking for a Dalmatian in this Doppel background, then the shape of the dog starts making itself apparent, and you start seeing the spots, and it starts making sense. So she applied this to a very well-known tune, and I will be showing you a method to recreate this experiment using Max MSP primarily, but through Max for Live. And we are going to build this together. And if we're successful with this build, then this is a good trick for you musicians to play on your friends, to take a well-known melody, something that you think or know that they would know, and run it through this machine that we'll build and see if they get the tune. And then once they don't get it, or if they don't get it, maybe some just might, but if they don't get it, when you play it for them as original, and then you play the variation, they'll always recognize that melody, despite the transpositions that go along with it. So yes, this is the case of the mysterious melody, and we are going to build a mysterious melody box using Max for Live. And how we will first start is we will go over to Max for Live, and we are going to open up a Max MIDI effect. I'm going to drop it in this channel here. Now here's how it starts out. It's very, very basic, nothing in it whatsoever, except for a couple of objects, MIDI in, MIDI out, which are pretty handy for a MIDI effect. So we're going to click over here to open it up, and we're going to open up Max MSP, the Max editor. And most of what we're going to be doing is going to be within Max until we've got it completely built. So I'm just going to full screen this. And I have my build notes here because I have built this object and tested it a few times to work out some of the kinks, and I'll explain some of the kinks that I ran into along when we get there. So what I'm first going to do is I'm just going to clear myself a workspace, because right now it's set up to work like it's Max for Live, so it's meant to work inside of Ableton. So whatever is above this device vertical limit is what you will see inside of Live. In this case, we don't really need to show much of anything, to be perfectly honest, especially from the algorithm. It's meant to just be this scientific device to a certain degree that'll do weird stuff. So I'm going to get rid of some of this comment text here because I don't really need it for what we need, but it's good to know that the MIDI in is going to be coming in from Live, and the MIDI out is going to be going out to Live. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start with the MIDI objects, the MIDI in and MIDI out, and we'll start. We need to clean this up, because what we want to do is when we're going to take a MIDI clip and we're going to run the note information from it and alter the note information. We're going to alter the pitch of the note. So we need to get that note information. And right now, this is just raw MIDI in, raw MIDI messages going in and out. And we can't get to it yet. But we can there's an object for that. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit N to create a box for a new object. And I know what I'm looking for by name, so I'm going to start typing it. I'm going to type a MIDI parse. And that's going to interpret raw MIDI data, which is exactly what I need. So I'm going to hit enter to auto-complete that. And then I'm going to I'm just going to disconnect this and drop it in here. Now what this does is it splits up the MIDI information into all its different categories. The stuff that we're going to be altering is the note on and off, which is a list of, it's sent as a list of pitch and velocity, and we won't really be dealing with the poly key pressure, but for this particular case, we will want it separated out from the MIDI stream as well. But all the rest of this stuff, we want it to go through without a hitch. So to reinterpret the MIDI data back into a raw MIDI signal, we need another object, and that is a MIDI format, and I'll prepare the data, and it looks to be pretty much the same. So I'm going to take this end and put it there. So what I'm going to start is we're going to skip the MIDI event message, and we're going to go with the channel, and that's going to be set channel. I'll scoot this stuff a little bit over for now, move it back a little bit later, just so you can see. Okay, pitch bend, aftertouch, program change, control CC, control change. And so these last two I'm not going to connect because I don't want this information coming through from here. I'm actually going to take care of that in a different circuit entirely. But I did want, just in case you use this device for anything else and you want to send like program changes or aftertouch or something like that through the signal, by connecting these, you still will be able to do so. Otherwise, the messages are blocked. So we've gone ahead and we've gotten this part of the circuit done. And what we've managed to do is we have now isolated the MIDI note data. By excluding it, it has been isolated, and we will be able to get to it in another method in just a second. One important thing, as computer science will always tell you, document your code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit C to set up a comment line. I'm going to say what this particular thing does. So it separates MIDI note data from stream. All else passes through. Goes right there, easy peasy. Now, how are we going to get to this? Now, we could make some objects to separate this stuff out and all that. And normally that would be an easy way to go about it, and probably a logical way to go about it as well. But in this particular case, I'm just going to use a separate object. And I'm going to click for N. Click in, I'm going to type N to bring up a new object box, as this is, in a sense, object-oriented programming. So I'm going to type N for note N. So now I'm going to receive just the note data, pitch, velocity, which is basically this, but it's already been separated into two messages, and I would have to separate this into two messages in this manner otherwise. So this is going to take the notes from Ableton, and we have to do something with it. So let's go, and before we start connecting everything, I also want to make sure that we have an output. So it's got to go somewhere after we do what we're going to do to it. So now I'm going to make a note not in, but note out. And we're going to leave those unconnected at the moment because those were going to be very crucial, but we just want them here for now. The next things that we're going to be doing is we're going to build the octave randomization circuit. Now, it's not too hard of a circuit to build. We're basically doing some randomization, but this is where I learned, like, this circuit is not too difficult to make once you know what you're doing, but what we were trying to get is we're trying to get true randomization where the same value doesn't repeat twice, or at least is highly unlikely to repeat twice. So in that concept, that changes the strategy that we're going to approach. Normally, if you want to just do some randomization, you would look for the random object because it will generate a random number. Even though there's, in essence, no true random possible in most computer science algorithms, because random is only, from a philosophical point, what randomness is just a pattern that we don't easily understand. It could be perfectly logical, and it could follow a very complex path that if we knew, we could understand. However, we just can't understand it, so we think that it's random. There's no true randomness in the world. I know that's a pretty controversial statement. But in this particular case, if I use the random, this is going to create a possibility of generating the same value twice. And I don't want that. So we're going to put this off to the side. This will come in handy for another stage in the game. But instead, we want a new object called earn. And this one generates random numbers without repeating, without duplicates. This is exactly what we want. So, in Dr. Deutsch's original paper, she talks about there being 3 values. It's either normal, an octave above, or an octave below. We're going to go ahead and follow those particular instructions. So, earn, we're going to give 3 objects, and we're going to take a look at the help on earn. Every single object in here has a help and a reference, so you can learn about what it does. It provides you examples in which it would be used, and can be very, very interesting. Now, this tells me that if I send a bang message, which is more like what a bang is do it. It's like, make this happen right now. So that when you send that, that's going to cause the circuit to fire, and it'll generate a random number between 0 and 9. And then once it's exhausted all those numbers that it's supposed to run through, then it'll send a little message out here, a little bang out, and won't move any further. Then once that's done, you got to clear it, and then you can continue again. This clearing and continuing again is a very tricky thing that most people get hung up on when using this object. And I actually had an issue with this for a little bit while I was creating this the tester circuit for this, the test run, when I was building this object. But it took me a while to figure it out. But the reference rather than the help, the reference rather than the help really helped me understand what was going on. So this is also a seed. This means this is gonna shuffle the order in which this randomization is occurring, and you can set this to a large number, and this is where we'll be employing our randomization to give it a random seed every time it restarts. So this gives us an idea on the right inlet would set the maximum, but we're going to give it an argument initially, and we're going to give it the argument of 3. That means it's just going to be 3 values that cycles through 0 through 2, and we'll be able to clear it. Once it gets through those 3 numbers, we'll clear it and send it on again and trigger it with each incoming node. So that's enough on the reference or the help for this particular thing. And we'll just close that. So yes, so now to test what I'm talking about, we're going to create a bang, which I did with hitting the button B, or with the letter B, because they do make a lot of things go quickly here and make it easier for people. So I'm going to give myself, type in I for integer. I'm going to give myself a number box. This is only just to see what's happening. And I'm going to do a reset on the circuit. But when I do that, I'm going to set up a couple of extra things. But before I do that, let's just get the octave randomization done first. First things first. We're going to create a new object, this object you haven't seen before, and it's going to be called a select, or SEL, either one. SEL is short for select, but you can use select as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select, and remember this creates 3 numbers in computer science numbers, so 0 is a number, so it's going to be 0, 1, 2. So select 0, space 1, space 2. Now, if it selects 0, it's going to send a bang through here. If it selects 1, it's going to send a bang through here. If it selects 2, it's going to send a bang through here. And if it's none of those, it'll go out there. But it'll always be one of those. So we don't have to really worry about that. So I'm going to connect this. And this is the value to be tested. The value is going to come from the urn. And then I'm going to create some basically static numbers, some constants that will be triggered. Now you do that by creating an integer, which it stores an integer value, but since I'm already giving it the value, it's going to be 12. And what we'll do is we're going to duplicate this twice. Okay, and we're going to change the information in here. And just to be cute, we'll do this. So, and we'll go minus 12. So, it will look like, if it's 0, it's going to go up an octave. If it's 1, it's going to stay in the middle. If it's 2, it's going to go down an octave. And we're going to feed all that to another integer box, which will just read whatever value is most recently gone through it. So to test to see if this will actually work, we still need one more piece. Otherwise, we're going to run into a problem. So we need to create a message box to tell this to clear. So I type M for message. We're going to do clear. But I'm also going to give it a secondary message as well to send a bang after it clears. Otherwise, what ended up happening to me was that it would clear it, but then it would drop one of the notes that was incoming after it cleared it. But by sending the clear and the trigger, it'll keep the timing. It won't drop that. It won't drop the incoming MIDI note. So it makes it all seamless. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, since I know I'm going to use this later, it'll give me an opportunity to teach you about triggers. In computer science, especially when you're dealing with programs, you might think that things happen simultaneously, but it doesn't actually happen simultaneously. Things happen in quick succession from each other, like microseconds of each other. However, sometimes you have to explicitly give it the order of instructions. So you have to say, okay, you do this first, then you do this, which gives us the trigger object. So I type T for trigger, which sends an input to many places. And the type of output, these arguments are basically pre-programming the object to do exactly more or less what I want it to do without any outside changing initially. This is just how to initialize the object for my purposes. So in this case, I'm going to use B and B because these are short names for bangs, because I want to send 2 bangs out. One's going to go one place and the other's going to go another place. And in fact, what we'll do real quick is we'll give this random, I'll do 1024 just for fun, and create another object, because I remember when we look at the earn help once again, you notice the format of changing the seed is seed and then the number. So we're going to create seeds, so we're creating the number, but it needs the word seed before it. So we will use the object prepend. We're going to add a message in front of an input, and then the message is seed. And messages are basically like commands that will get us to do different things. In this case, we're using it to change the algorithm on the randomization that's currently going on. So what we'll do here is we'll take this bang, and remember this is when all the numbers have been exhausted, once we got through all of them. To reset it, we will first make a new seed, and then secondly clear it and bang out another one. So yes, we're good. We're good on that aspect. And just so you know, I'm actually speaking the truth. What we'll do is we'll create an empty message box, and if you put something that sends a message or sends something to the right side of a message box, it will set the message without outputting it out. So basically, it'll show you what you see here. And to show you what that's true, I will connect a bang, and look at that, seed 410. So that's what's going there. So it's now saying play the 410th seed of this algorithm of randomization for these three numbers that you have. So we have now. Let's just go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup and commenting real quick. Let's see the randomization there. Octave randomization here. Scooch that in a little bit. That's all well and good. Now we've got the randomization going on. We have the input. Let's connect these. How do we make this work? Okay. So when I started building this particular thing, I recognized that there's some issues, or not some issues, there's some problems that we had to address. One of those problems is the basis of a MIDI note message. Whenever you press a key on a keyboard, or if you send a MIDI note from your DAW, it'll send at least three messages. It'll send the note on message, which is usually a velocity message greater than 0 more often than not, and it'll send a pitch number as well. But when you do the note off, it also sends that pitch number again to tell the system what MIDI note to shut off, just in case you're dealing with like a polyphonic thing where you're playing a chord and you hold two notes, but you let go of one, so you don't let go of it, so it doesn't cut off all of them. So in this particular case, what we need to do is separate the note on and note off, but preserve the new pitch. Because if we were to take this as is, every time there'd be a note off, it would trigger this randomization as well, and then we would never get the note to shut off properly. Or not never, but it would be difficult to get the note to shut off. So we need to isolate the note on and note off, the velocity 0 and the velocity 127. But we also need to store the altered MIDI note as well, so whenever it's time for that note to turn off, it'll receive this, the message will be complete where it'll send the pitch that was altered, or the altered pitch that's been stored, as well as the note off signal. So to do that, we need to use a couple of objects that we haven't used yet, and we also have to kind of specify the order of things and use our lovely little integer box as a storage device as well. So to do that, we're going to look at first isolating the note on, note off. Now to do that, there's an object called strip note, which filters MIDI off messages. Now, we do want to filter it, but we also do want to preserve it as well. So we'll also create another object called route pass. Now, I specifically chose route pass instead of route or select, which select and route pass are all related, because all I want is when that 0 comes through for the MIDI off, I want it just to go directly. I don't want to have to convert it. I don't want to have it do anything else. I just want it to go straight through. And nothing else but that. So I will now connect the velocity to the route pass as well as to the right inlet of the strip note. I'll take the pitch from the left outlet of the mid note in to the left inlet of the strip note. And then I'll create triggers for them. And these will be the same type of trigger, but not the same as before. Now this time it'll be a trigger, bang, integer. In computer science, everything moves from right to left. So the integer, when it receives the signal, in this case, this is a pitch. When it gets a pitch from live, it will first send that pitch number, because it is MIDI pitches are number of 0 to 127. So it will send that number along the right hand outlet and then send a command to do something out of the left. Now, what do we want it to do? We want it to trigger our randomization. So we'll take the pitch, but what do we want this MIDI, what do we want this pitch note for? Well, this randomization seems like it's a 12, a 0, and then a negative 12, so it seems like it should modify this number in some way. Now, how do we do that? Let's add them together. Simple addition. We're going to add two numbers together and then output the result. But here's how this thing works. Remember, we calculate from right to left. So when we get information in the right, it'll just store there. All pretty much like how these numbers are stored in as arguments. They basically are stored in the right-hand side. And then the left-hand side, whatever goes in there will set the other half of the equation if it's not 0. If you just send a bang through here, it's just going to be 0. It'll set the other half of the equation and cause it to calculate. So when you send a number through here, that's when it'll perform the operation. So, that being said, we want to store the original note number, trigger the calculation. Oopsie. And then once the result calculates, it goes in and it'll trigger being added to or subtracted from the original note information, the original note number. And this goes just out to the pitch. Now, from this strip note, when it's a note on, we want it to just go through completely pure. Now, when it turns off, however, we also need to create a trigger bang integer as well, because we need to specifically tell it when to do what. So the first thing is we're going to send we send that output first there to turn it off, and then we will get, with our handy little integer storage, we will get the results stored here, and then we will tell that to come out as well. So basically, what's going to happen is note comes in, and the pitch goes through here to be stored while it triggers the modification. Once it's modified, the information of that pitch gets stored here until it receives a note off. When it receives the note off sends the note off command, and then shortly afterwards, and pretty much immediately afterwards, it sends the number to which it needs to turn off. Now, I could probably flip around the order on this, but when I tested it, it worked fine this way, so probably doesn't matter as much. But, we could test the order and flip it around, or you can feel free to do so. Let me know if I got something off. Perfectly fine. So I'm going to comment that this thing prevents double trigger caused by note offs. Because a note off also sends a pitch. So, and since we're using the pitch itself to trigger the earn, which, we don't have to. We could just use the note on information, honestly, to do it if we really wanted to. There would be very little that would change. But I think it's just better this way, because you make sure, by making sure this order is explicit, by specifying, okay, before this circuit even gets triggered, we make sure that the number is stored. We make sure that this calculation happens exactly the way that we need it to happen. And if we're using the strip note, we might get it perfectly, but we might not. So I just like to leave very little to chance. And if you're worried about how things are going to work in order, make sure you set the order yourself. So we should be pretty much done, except we want to do one last thing. That last thing is, I'd like to set up a randomization of the seed every time the device is loaded up. And there's a very handy little object that'll help me do that. And it's called a load bang. So when it loads, it's going to send a bang. Pretty simple, huh? And this is in here just for testing purposes. It's not really that important. But, you always want to set up some stuff for you to test, so you can test your device if you feel the need to. So now that I'm going to lock the patch just for fun, because when you're editing the patch, you hit these buttons unless you hold down Command, I believe. Okay. Perfect. Looks good. All right. So, I'm going to unlock this patch now. And you notice there's nothing really for us to really control. But let's give ourselves a little bit of visual feedback and a little bit of visual control as well, just so we can just so we can say we did make it compatible for live. So, we're going to throw in a button. Number box. And we're going to move those up here. Where'd that button go? Oh well. We'll make another one. Alright, there we go. So, we're going to do a few things here. And just to be cheeky, just to be cheeky, why not? We're going to do something fun. Because I don't want to drag a patch cable all the way over there. We're just going to make a send. And we're going to give it a name, seed, number. And then we're going to turn this into its match and receive. And we're going to do that. We won't have to prepend seed because it doesn't really matter. What we'll do here is we'll give it a comment, call it seed. Actually, we'll do all caps. Seed. Yeah, why not? Make another one. So we will make that a receive. That will trigger it. Give it a comment. Randomize seed. There's already seed randomization that's going on, but you can just have some too, and that'll make you feel like you have some more control, which is always nice to do. So we'll just put that here, scoot these over a bit, kind of helps it line up. Now, we're not really going to want to see this thing when we're looking at live, right? Well, we can make sure we don't have to. And that's by making sure we include things in the presentation mode and make sure this is open in the presentation mode. So we're going to add to presentation. Then we're going to go to presentation mode. And maybe just make it line up a little bit more. Maybe let it go up a bit. And last but not least, I want to go into the inspector. Not the calendar. Really? Okie dokie. Okay. I did not mean to do that, but okay. So I think that this is probably good. What I will do now is I will lock the device. I will save it. We will call it Mystery. Oh, I can't spell. And we'll save it as that. We will close Max. And okay, I knew I got something wrong. See, that thing is still here. So it needs to open in presentation mode. So we're going to go back in. And we are going to click on the inspector for the patch inspector. And we are going to click open in presentation. So, and we're going to do a couple more things too, just to clean it up. I'm going to grab these, and there should be the view, hide on lock. So when I lock the patch, these will go away. Presentation view as well. Excellent. Save. One more thing though. One more thing I'm finding a little annoying. I want to set the device width. Because it doesn't need to be very wide at all. It only needs to be this big on this way. So I'm going to lock it again, save it, and we will close. Okay. So now let's test this and see if it works. I have a preliminary testing device. That's just a C3 hit every quarter note. And for this, we don't have to hear it because it doesn't really matter. It's just we're going to record the output and see what we get. Okay, what I can tell here is that the algorithm itself is not perfect. We have a couple of points where it does repeat, but that's most likely because of how the reset thing goes. So I would probably do a little bit of more mucking about to figure out exactly how to make sure that it never, ever, ever repeats, even when it does its thing. And there's probably a couple ways to go about that too, but I'll have to do some more thinking on it. But for the meantime, it more or less works. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Pepsi challenge real quick. Make sure that my Let's see if that works. If it doesn't, oh well. As long as it works for you guys. Now I've turned this down a little bit, and what I've got going on in the routing is very simple. This operator is taking the MIDI from this particular mystery melody, and it's being processed already by our mystery melody. So what we'll do now is we'll record a new clip. I will unmute this, and we will see what happens. Ready? Go. Pretty interesting, huh? So, I'll play what we recorded one more time. Now, let's take the mystery melody, and now for the reveal. Drum roll. Just kidding. Pretty cute, huh? So this was the original, the original piece of music that Dr. Deutsch used in her experiment dealing with octave generalization and tune recognition. So I figured it would be fun to recreate that. And it's not necessarily the hardest of a build. It doesn't take necessarily too long. It takes longer for me to explain it than it does to build it, especially once you work out the bugs for the randomization. And it's not perfect, but it's closer to the original concept than previously. And if I muck about a little bit more with the settings on the urn and stuff, I should probably be able to get it. So this was a little window into the crazy world of Max for Live, and the crazy world into psychoacoustics and music perception done for fun. And the implication on this experiment is interesting. If you do end up building this, play a party game with your friends of name that tune altered and see how they do. I'm thinking about maybe doing one of those maybe once a month or once every like few weeks or something along those lines. Maybe doing like a prize for the first like few people that get it. But it's just something fun to do, and there's so many different interesting concepts that can be exploited from a lot of the different properties of psychoacoustics. This is just a very simple paper to really go over and introduce for people, especially for people who aren't familiar with doing things based upon somebody's research or anything like that. So if you want to get some extra nerd points, this is a good way to go about it. And this has some very interesting implications when you extrapolate the concept even farther. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little nerd out with Max for Live and the case. Once again, this is Dr. Deutsch and the case of the mysterious melody. Have a good one. Peace.